lighting up with reports of an alleged triangle-shaped UFO in the
Some local residents claim to have seen an unidentified flying object just after sunset last evening, with one young man even claiming to have been visited by what he describes as a Skyman.
He didn't look human. I knew he wasn't a human.
He has been so razor sharp focused. I guess I just figured he was finally ready to tell his story.
Here's the HGH.
I'm telling you, it was really, really loud. I was standing right here, and it was like zzz.
It's our magnet, or what's left of it. It was propelled somehow.
Okay, so what? You really think that aliens did that?
I don't know what to think, Gina. All I know is something's going on, and I don't think it's human related. Arthur C. Clarke once said, "A sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic." And I've always liked magic.
Hi, I'm Linda Semlitz, President of the Board of Arts and Humanities Bainbridge. Thank you for joining us this evening. Art and Humanities Bainbridge's mission is to connect you to the abundance of creativity in our community, to empower and to inspire. If you found out about tonight's program on Currents online, terrific. If not, please take a look at our website at www.bainbridgecurrents.com and make it your go-to location to find out what's happening on the rock. Register for our newsletter and tell your friends, and if you like what you see, consider supporting our organization with a donation. In addition, you're going to find out about our arts and education program where we bring teaching artists to children in grades K through 12 throughout Bainbridge Island, and our public art program where we collaborate with the City of Bainbridge Island to create and present wonderful pieces of public art all over. Tonight, I have the privilege of introducing you to some very special creatives on Bainbridge Island. Daniel Myrick will answer questions about his new film, Skyman, which premiered June 30th, 2020, and also features Bainbridge Island author Michael Brain. And our program will be moderated by Julia Fair. Daniel Myrick was born in September 1963 in Sarasota, Florida. He's a director and writer, best known for co-directing the 1999 landmark found footage horror film, The Blair Witch Project. Some of his other films include Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2, The Objective, and Solstice. And in 2006, he co-founded Raw Feed, a direct-to-DVD division of Warner Home Video. His partners include X-File executive producer John Shaban and 24 executive producer Tony Krantz. His latest film, Skyman, premiered in June of 2020. Skyman's a faux documentary about a man, Carl Merriweather, obsessed with reliving an encounter he had as a 10-year-old with an extraterrestrial. 30 years later, Carl is convinced that the alien will return to seek him out on his 40th birthday. I can't wait to hear from Daniel has to say about Skyman, and who better to lead the discussion than Julia Fair. Julia moved to Bainbridge about 3 years ago with her husband and 2 kids and has found her work home at Islandwood. Originally a native of Mississippi, Julia started her career working on the Blair Witch Project. Her first produced feature-length scripts, Believers and Alien Raiders, were released on DVD by Warner Brothers Home Video. Julia strongly encouraged you to rent them, as she still receives residuals. Quentin Tarantino counts Alien Raiders as one of his personal favorites. Just saying. Julia was tapped by Paramount Pictures and Universal Studios, where she worked behind the scenes in the Brain Trust for both Stephen King's The Dark Tower and Michael Bay's Transformers. And she recently spoke at the Library of Congress discussing the making of modern myths and how Blair Witch, like War of the Worlds, reveals the way humans can seek out and even forcefully choose to believe misinformation. Kind of relevant, don't you think? On behalf of Arts and Humanities Bainbridge, I'm so excited to present to you Daniel Myrick and Julia Fair. Take it away.
Very happy to be here.
Well, happy to be here. This has been a movie that's a long time coming. How many years did this take, Dan, to get onto the screen?
I would probably say when I started writing the script, I think was in 2014. And no, I'm lying. I think that was when the idea. So it was around 2016 when the script was being in process. So it's been, when we started production, it's been at least a couple of years. So it always takes a long time, but two or 3 years counting the script process.
It was about, I think, so 3 years before we came up here to Bainbridge. And thank you for the lovely introduction, Linda, and thanks to Inez, who talked us into doing this Q&A. She's like, oh my goodness, we have Michael, who I can see over here on the side, who has one of the parts in the movie. But we really started getting into shooting. Right when we got to Bainbridge, I think. Is that right?
Yeah, I had scouted, we shot everything in Southern California in Apple Valley, California, which is just a little bit south of Victorville on the other side of San Bernardino. And I have a good dear friend that lives out in that area that helped me scout, and we used his house as a location and sort of a base of operations. But yeah, we shot, we scouted everything prior to moving out here, but once we moved out here, you know, shortly after that, we had principal photography. And prior to that, we did a lot of shooting, basically workshopping the actors, where we'd go out and shoot a few scenes, some of which ended up in the movie, prior to us moving out here. But principal photography was done after we moved to Bainbridge.
And I feel like I remember I was over at Faraway Entertainment in the Bainbridge cinemas, and I met Michael, and Michael was saying, oh, I have this book out. It's a book on UFOs. And I'm like, it's funny that you should mention that, because my husband's been working on this passion project for 3 years, and we're just moving into shooting. And Michael said, oh, I'm going to go down to McMinnville to sell some of these books about his long-term history with UFOs. And I said, I think this is an opportunity. And so I connected you two, and that was the first time you had heard about McMinnville, I think. Yeah,
that's how we went to Linwood and had some coffee or something, and we talked about it, and it mentioned this UFO festival in McMinnville, and right near the Trent Farm, which is one of the most famous UFO areas, famous photographs back in the 50s. And so I thought it would be an interesting thing to have our main character, Carl, sort of go to some of these festivals. And the McMinnville UFO Fest, which is one of the biggest ones in the country, was a great opportunity for me to go there with a camera in hand and have the lead actor, Michael Selly, who starred in the film, basically wander around the festival sort of incognito, completely in character, where we had this great production value, and, you know, thousands of people are there. This was all, you know, obviously pre-COVID, but we had a lot of opportunities to interview people, talk to people, and allow him to kind of refine his character as we were, you know, mingling there in the crowd. So it was a really great addition to the film that I hadn't originally scripted, and Michael helped turn me on to that.
And then I remember some of the early discussions we were having. The reason that I like Skyman, and we knew that Skyman might end up being compared to Blair, but the reason I felt so compelled about it was already the tenor of the country was changing into this kind of partisan feeling. And for me, I was like, what I really like is the center of the story on Barstow. And for the people who don't know Barstow very well, a lot of UFO stories are in these hinterlands of America, usually places that the economy's not so great. And so Barstow's just east of LA. You have yards with nothing in them, bare dirt. And I'm like, here's a bunch of people where you're like, if the 4 billion years of the universe are coming together to produce something, why would it be Barstow? And that's one of my favorite lines in the movie. That woman is she in is it a car lot?
It's like an auto garage.
In an auto garage. And you're like, do you believe that aliens exist? And she's like, you really think this is all there is? And so for me, this compelling thing was 4 billion years of the universe brings you to a car lot or a place in Barstow. And that's the culmination of the evolution of the universe. That can't be all there is. And yet in this place, where you have people who might feel like they're thought of as less than in our country, you have this one guy who's thought of as less than everyone else. But he's the guy that thinks aliens are going to cross time and space for him because he's that significant. And what I like about these spaces in the middle of nowhere are, it's the place you see big sky, you see the universe turning around you, and you have this moment of, how can this not be significant? How can the universe not be amazing? And how can we not be amazing in it? And if Carl is really going to be the one abducted by aliens, then what does that mean for the rest of us? What significance do we all have? So for me, it was more of this moment of saying, let's look at the shared humanity in each other. And you might think that these close encounters type stories are about this silliness and you're waiting for somebody to be abducted and it's about the scares. And for me, what I wanted to surprise people with, which was, it's really a story about the significance of all of us and our shared humanity. And I hope that came through. I always want to try to write reviews. I'm like, this is why this was worth watching.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Carl is a character that we can all sort of relate to. He's a bit of an outsider. He's on the spectrum, and some would argue that he's got Asperger's, and I never saw that as a weakness in him. I always felt that was, we assume that these are disabilities and these are failings in some way. But I like the idea of that maybe he's special because of it, and maybe these are manifestations because he is special. This is why he is an outsider and doesn't quite fit in with the universe that he's been given, right? So these so-called aliens, or whatever they may be, this higher power out there that's seeking him out, at least according to him, his belief is this kind of validation for him, I think, and a lot of people, I think, are looking for that in their lives. And so there's a lot of analogies there, and really at the end of the day, the movie is a character study of this guy who's fairly ordinary, and at first blush you may think he's something, just a simple working class guy, but as you get to know him, just like everybody, he's a more complex character than what you see at face value. And then I hoped towards the end of the movie, you're like, well, I'm rooting for Carl. I hope he does get abducted. I hope he does eventually get that redemption he's looking for. And so it's certainly a story that was sort of, in some ways, kind of harkens back to when I was growing up as a kid, and in the late 70s and early 80s, where UFOs and Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster were all the rage, and there's been a resurgence of that today, I think, and it is, we're as a species, we're looking for something that's bigger and grander than ourselves, I think, in a lot of ways, and Carl sort of, I think, embodies that, and in this simple, direct way, and shooting it like a documentary, I felt was a bit more intimate portrayal of that, rather than something that was all slick and polished. So it was a lot of fun, and so much credit goes to the actors. They embraced the characters. They were committed wholeheartedly throughout the whole shooting process, and we had the luxury of being able to kind of go out when inspiration struck and go and shoot some of these scenes, sporadically over kind of the chronology of the actual storyline of the film. So that you don't normally get to do in a movie.
And also, I would like to remind people, you can ask your questions in the chat, and Ez has started it up there. So just ask your question over in the chat, and I'll ask Dan for you. The other thing that I remembered was one of your favorite bits is Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the moment with the mashed potatoes. This is important. This is
This is
significant.
important. Yeah.
And it also, I feel like there's been a through line in your career. One of the first things that you shot of significance was you worked with John Pearson on Split Screen. That's how Blair actually originally got funded. And for those who don't know, John Pearson discovered Kevin Smith, and he discovered Spike Lee, and he discovered Dan. He was in town in Orlando. He wanted to shoot a little clip called Gate Orlando. And Dan was the best cinematographer in Orlando, and so he hired him on. And then they went and shot a guy named, did a little clip of Billy Yeager. So both Billy Yeager is a guy who was always hustling. Dan and I are watching Better Call Saul right now. He reminds me a little bit of Saul Goodman in some ways. But he's always trying to get ahead and becoming this great, significant musician. And it was a really beautiful little character piece. And I know that there was something that you found really compelling about Billy Yeager, the same way you found those mashed potatoes. This is important. This is significant. And I just wanted to draw that in. Can you say that that does speak a little bit to what you were thinking about with Carl?
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of references to Close Encounters in the film. It was a huge inspiration for me over the years. It really arguably made me want to become a filmmaker. But and there's some Easter egg references in the movie to Close Encounters as well. If you have a watchful eye, you can pick up on them. But for me, this is, one of the compelling things about Close Encounters wasn't necessarily all the kind of special effects of the day and whatnot, but it was just this ordinary guy that was sort of chosen, and it was really about a story of all these everyday people in humanity that were, however, for whatever reason, were sort of chosen and invited to come onto this spaceship, right? So I always thought that was fascinating, and it was one of the first films really to come out where the aliens were actually benevolent. They were there to kind of show us and enlighten us rather than attack us and vaporize New York City or LA. So that was a refreshing change as well. But yeah, certainly I think there are influences in Skyman and references in Skyman regarding that. Everyday man. That's been chosen, and my take on it is a little bit more. I think I would say organic in the sense that I like there to be ambiguity in my characters, where you're not sure Carl's just flat out crazy. You're kind of walking this line between, is this guy really onto something, or is he just a knucklehead? And I think his sister, who's played by Nicolette Sweeney, another lovely person and a great actress in her own right, is sort of, I've always envisioned her as the audience's character. She's always sort of like tolerating Carl and his shenanigans, but also has the burden of having to pay the bills and keep a level head through all of this while Carl's off in fantasy land. So we sympathize with her because she's sort of saddled with this crazy brother of hers that's wanting to reunite with this alien of his youth, and she's just trying to navigate that best she can, and that's a little bit like the Terry Garr character in Close Encounters, but more in a kind of a documentary sort of, I guess, postmodern format, right? So yeah, there's a lot of references there.
Well, it looks like Michael, one of our stars, says the subject has now really come into its own with recent revelations by the Navy. Hey, there's something really to this. I assume Michael's talking about all that recent, where we're like, wait a second, we're saying these really are UFOs.
Well, there's certainly a lot of fodder out there to contemplate between the famous Tic Tac videos that were from the Air Force that have been recently released, the declassification of the Blue Book files. There's a significant amount of talk and chatter and speculation about what does the military know or not know, or are they hiding, or it fuels all this sort of conspiracy, right? So it is it's an interesting, I think, product of our times that is reflective of a bigger transmission of information that we're seeing all across social media, right? I think this finds fertile ground in social media. And that whole sort of subculture has always fascinated me. You know, why is this subject so significant to people? What is it about it that they gravitate towards, that we all in some way feel compelled to want to know answers for? And that's part of what Skyman is a little bit of an exploration into that sort of subculture. And certainly it is seen a resurgence as of late with a lot that's been going on.
Craig Jacob Brown, I hope I got your name right, says, I've not seen the film. I'm looking forward to seeing it. It seems as if Dan is saying the genre is documentary or drama or mockumentary. Care to classify?
It's not really a mockumentary in that sense. It's not, you know, really a comedy. I guess the best description would be docudrama. You know, it is, you know, rooted in sort of real events and from my childhood and characterizations that I've kind of put a composite together to create this format, but it is all scripted, and these are fictional characters. As a matter of fact, I'm a character in the film. I'm acting as sort of the filmmaker, the documentarian, if you will, chronicling Carl's journey out into the desert. So I'm even, you know, got a little bit of influence of what's going on in there, and so it's not a found footage film. It's not a straight up, obviously, a documentary or a mockumentary. So it's more of a docudrama, I would say, in that. If you parse it down to that, it's probably that.
Well, I think people forget, like, we're now in the reality TV, social TV age. And so our acceptance of receiving stories that blend a feeling of reality with a feeling of fiction is completely different than when Blair came out. Because I remember when Blair came out, we're like, we'll call this method filmmaking. And everybody acted like it had never been thought of before. But you had reiterated time and again, everybody said, oh, Cannibal Holocaust, that's what inspires you. And you kept on saying, no, it's Spinal Tap. Spinal Tap is what inspired us for this format. And that is, and you know, he's such a great filmmaker. All of his comedies, which are, I guess we call them mockumentaries now, but it was this idea that you could shoot it like a documentary, treat it across the plate like a documentary, but it was obviously a fiction. And at the time, people really had a hard time working their brain around, well, how are you going to shoot it? How are you going to explain who's behind the camera? What is the reason for a camera to be there? And now I feel like you had wanted to do something that was just this intimate character study for a while, but people's willingness to suspend their disbelief about who was running the camera and why and when was much lower. And now that we have YouTube and even the Kardashians, people are like, oh yeah, sure, there's just a camera there, like The Office. We don't even need to know who's behind the camera. We can mix all these medias and blends, and what matters is, do you have a good story to hang your hat on? And
yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to what best suits the story. And you know, I literally have 3 versions of the script. I have a straight up narrative version of the script where it's more of the bigger budget approach to it. There's a found footage version of the script where it's just Carl's videotape, and we were just very a la Blair Witch, right? And then the hybrid version of which I ended up shooting, which I felt was the best kind of balance of both approaches, where I could have some creative license as the filmmaker, the fictional filmmaker, you know, seeing Carl's story through my own lens and my own interpretation, but still maintaining this intimacy and discovery with Carl, whom you've never seen before. And if he was a known actor, it just wouldn't have come off the same way, right? And if it was all lit and, you know, very purposeful, I think it just wouldn't have had the same feeling to it. So it was the kind of story, I think, really that was speaking to me to be more of an intimate documentary sort of portrayal of this guy's life, this very kind of simple life that that this format, I think, best serves. And it doesn't apply for all films. It doesn't apply for all stories. But for this one in particular, I think it sort of lent itself to that, and that's really why I went with it.
Also saves a lot of money on the budget because
That's true. I mean, but what a lot of people don't understand, and I'm more fortunate than most, is I edit all my own stuff, but you really spend the money in the edit process because you're shooting everything so, all over the place. You're different angles, and it's not like a normal narrative setup where you've got 5 takes of the same angle, you move on to the reverse, got 5 takes there, and you move on, and it's all very structured and compartmentalized, and the editor can take it over, and they've got the script right there in front of them, they can put it all together. This is shot much more like a documentary, so in the post process you have all these different angles that you can cut a scene in infinite number of ways, so you really spend all your time in the edit process versus in production. So if you've got your own edit system, you're not having to pay per hour for all that time and investment and trial and error that you normally would have to spend. But that's just, but it is a product of economy for sure.
I have a question from Denise. Have you ever had an otherworldly experience? What drew you to this genre? And why do you think found footage is so effective in scare movies?
It's hard to define otherworldly experience. I mean, I certainly, when I was younger, I've had some pretty ghostly encounters that really traumatized me, that I'll never forget. And whether it was just my imagination or if it was something actually legitimately real, I guess it's open to speculation. But yeah, there's certainly, maybe as you get older, your critical thinking skills improve, and you maybe look back in retrospect and think, oh, that was just X, Y, or Z. But certainly, I'm not exempt from having some pretty freaky experiences having grown up. And we live near the woods too, so there's always something going on in the woods. But with regards to this sort of found footage approach, there's always been something that's drawn me to that. Like Blair Witch was inspired by shows like In Search of and Ancient Astronauts, which were shot in these sort of pseudo documentary formats. And I just think when the human mind sees a documentary, it operates on a different muscle than a normal straight up narrative. There's just something about it feeling real, unpredictable. You don't have the normal kind of safety net that a produced show gives you, or at least you think you have. And that spontaneity and kind of improvisational format that real life is all about keeps you off kilter. And I think that really lends to the fear. I think it works really well for horror, because that's our job as a filmmaker, is to keep the audience off balance. So if visually and sort of kind of the visual kinetics are sort of off balance, and the acting is not predictable, and the lines feel spontaneous, then that little part of your brain that thinks they know what's going to happen next is suddenly no longer a resource for you. And I think that inability to control, or at least think you can control what's going to happen next, is taken away. It makes you very nervous, and then your imagination starts to take and run away with you. So that's was very effective on Blair Witch, and I think if executed well in horror, it can be very effective in horror.
And what drew you, feel like what drew you to this genre for Skyman? Because it's more UFOs. I know you have.
Yeah, this is more sci-fi, I guess I would call it maybe sci-fi suspense, but yeah, I mean, I've loved sci-fi my whole life. I probably love it, every bit as much, if not more, than horror in a lot of ways. I think I just like movies that sort of, take you by surprise. I like films that make you think. I like films that run their characters through all these different challenges. I like films that take ordinary people and put them in extraordinary situations. It's always very compelling for me to watch and to try to produce. And I think Skyman was an attempt also for me to sort of get back to my kind of fundamental roots where I learned a lot from Blair in that style of filmmaking and being able to just use unknown actors and keep things very simple and fluid on set. So when you have a small production footprint like that, you can really do that. So that was also a draw as well. So yeah, it was a passion project that my producer Joe Restaino believed in from the very beginning, and helped get it underway. And again, it's rare, but it was one of those projects I was able to do it my way, the way I saw it, and cast exactly who I felt was right for the role, and didn't have anybody breathing down my neck. And you just don't get that. You're not able to do that very often.
And this is from Linda. Which characters most remind you of yourself growing up?
I think that all the characters are sort of a hybrid of me in some way. I mean, certainly there's a lot of me and Carl. There's a lot of me and Gina. I mean, as you're writing these characters, you're pulling on your own experiences and your own kind of reference points. So I think when Gina says something about her brother, there's that a part of my sarcasm coming out in that, but I also like to think that Carl's kind of sense of wonder and drive to find answers is also a part of me. So there's a little bit of me in all the characters, but also from people I've researched over the years growing up. I had a UFO club when I was 13 and, read lots of testimonials and, was fascinated by what drove people into this, experiences and search for answers. And so that's pulled from that as well. So yeah, it's a little bit of everything. But certainly I can't escape that there's a little bit of me in all those characters.
I feel like one of the things that people don't realize is this movie is very much a testament to the accuracy of the history of the UFO world. Like there's a lot of very much like walking through, even in McMinnville, it's here are the major locations. This is the sequencing of the history of UFOs. And this is why, people really enjoy these stories. And so, I mean, it was more than I did. I found it very interesting from a perspective of we want to be significant, and is it a story of his love for his father and looking for a place in this world? But you really like it's also walking through kind of this interesting look at people across the United States. And
yeah, I was really wanted to make sure that I treated the subject matter and the characters with real sincerity. I mean, I spent a lot of time researching. I read tons of books, and pulling from my own childhood and the experiences I had in my own childhood, and I just wanted to make sure that if somebody watched this film that was particularly knowledgeable about ufology, maybe an experiencer themselves, wouldn't think I just phoned it in. And I wanted to make sure that a lot of the references in the film, whether you're a UFO expert or not, rang true, because there are several scenes and references. If you're knowledgeable, you'll catch them, and you'll understand that Carl has done his homework, and Carl is not just some guy that is looking for publicity or what have you. He's really struggling with his experience as a kid and looking for answers. And I wanted to treat that characterization and that subculture with respect and authenticity. So I had to do my homework and make sure that a lot of the references that he uses were valid and legitimate.
Another question from Linda. What has it been like to debut a film during the COVID pandemic? That's an epic story from like February.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think, our initial plan, which is kind of interesting, when we finished up the movie, we were hoping for a theatrical release, which you always are. And I came up with this idea that I thought would be pretty cool, that we sort of do this so-called band tour with the film, where we go back to all the UFO festivals and screen the movie across the country at all the major UFO festivals. And we had booked McMinnville to do a screening there, and we were talking to Roswell and started mapping out the Chileas Festival here in Washington. And we started mapping out this sort of rollout that we'd have this cool tour of the movie at all these UFO festivals. And of course, the COVID hit, and that sort of erased that idea. And so we were sitting around, thinking of how to sort of pivot from that. And the last kind of stop on our tour was going to be an outdoor screening in Barstow. I thought it would be cool to do like a drive-in outdoor screening in Barstow, where we all could get together, sort of this mini Coachella, and watch the movie and have a good time. And lo and behold, drive-ins kind of make this resurgence during COVID. Like, what better way to see Skyman than at a drive-in? So through Joe Rustano, my producer's help, we were able to book a lot of drive-ins throughout the country, and a ton of people got to see the movie the old-fashioned way. And it was really kind of this strange silver lining with all the tragedy we've seen with COVID, that we were able to screen this movie in particular, at the drive-in. So now it's out in wide release on video and whatnot, but it was nice to kind of roll it out initially at the drive-in theater.
Well, I also remember we had Storm Area 51 right at the beginning of the launch.
I remember that. Yeah.
And then we had this whole discussion of, well, should we go out there and premiere the movie at Storm Area 51? And then there's some concern that somebody's going to get shot. So you have the premiere of your movie.
And I was almost done with the edits. Like, what would I shoot out there, and how would I get Michael out there? He looked different because he had rapped long ago, and so it would have been a lot of effort just to get a few shots out at that Storm Area 51. But a friend of mine was out there and shot some footage for us, and I think I used 1 or 2 shots from it. But in the chronology of the story, it was we were already sort of, it wouldn't have fit in with the chronology because Carl has already been taken up, right, and disappeared. So, but
I thought you might premiere it.
It's just another example, though, like this resurgence of this entire kind of UFO thing has kind of taken over again, which has been really interesting. But yeah, it would have been cool to premiere there. I don't know how safe it would have been. I don't know. But, yeah.
From Denise, is there a story in your head or on paper that you're dying to tell? What's next?
Well, yeah, we're doing several things now. We're in the midst of shooting a horror anthology series in Florida, of all places. That's where I grew up. We shot the pilot episode there right before the pandemic hit. A friend of mine, Chris Peckinpah, wrote the first episode, and I directed it. And then we've got 5 more shows to shoot once we're able to go back into production again. And we've got the likes of Jeffrey Reddick, who did Final Destination, as well as Danny McBride, who did Underworld. So we've got them on as directing some episodes as well. So that's sort of in the works now. And in the meantime, we've created this quarantine creep show online short horror film contest. It's going to be launching first part of September, for all those young filmmakers out there that are sitting around with nothing better to do, and pick up their cell phones or cameras and submit a 3-minute horror short into our contest, which is being co-sponsored with Sue social platform, which is launching in September. And that should be a lot of fun. So that's sort of on my immediate plate over the next 6 or 7 months. And then, of course, I've got another script I want to start writing that is a little bit farther down the road. So, that and bike packing.
So tell us about bike packing in the zombie apocalypse.
Don't get me started.
Well, I had actually meant to talk about Blair a little bit more, just in terms of comparing this to that, and casting and method filmmaking and all that sort of thing. I feel like it's always an interesting thing to talk about in terms of the Did you do Skyman the same way you cast Blair in terms of the
It's
method?
very similar. I mean, I really like the casting process. I mean, some directors hate it, but I really enjoy the audition casting process. And, you know, we learned a lot on Blair Witch about screening for, you know, improvisational skill and actors that sort of have the chops in that department that come across very natural and are able to think on their feet. And we learned a lot of techniques in the audition process to help kind of vet out those talents that are really good at that. So I brought some of that to bear on the Skyman audition process. We had like 4 or 5 open calls in LA. And, you know, I had a pretty general ideas of my 3 main actors. And, but you're never really sure until that individual walks in the room. And even if you have one profile in your head, someone may walk in from left field and completely change your take on what you thought you wanted, and they come in and really show you something different. But Mike was sort of in between what I had in mind and what he brought to the table, and he really nailed it. I mean, I think he came on the 2nd or 3rd round of open call, and he just had this sort of interesting kind of quiet intensity about him, and this kind of innocence at the same time. And he's got a master's degree in film himself and understood the film process, which was really helpful. And he happened to be a sound guy too, which was, you know, very convenient on set. So then once I sort of had him nailed down, it was kind of developing the same process for his sister. I needed to find an actress that kind of you would buy would be his sister. And so we did a lot of improv. I did have some sides there in the audition readings where we had them, you know, read from the script. And then I'm a big believer in holding open auditions online, where I just get people from all over the world sending in their reels. And even though you don't cast somebody necessarily, you'll find somebody that you really love and you'll put a pin in for later, which happened on this Black Veil project in Florida. Like one of the finalists for Skyman, Abigail Island, who I really loved, but wasn't quite right for the Gina role, I ended up casting as a lead in my pilot episode 2 years later for the Black Veil episode. So it's just a great process. I really enjoy it. And as a writer, director, I mean, when you see your lines kind of come to life in the room, it just gives you a whole new perspective. It's really great.
And so I can't remember this, but in Blair, you had the prison scene you should run us through that a little bit, because
well, in Blair Witch, we knew we were going to do completely improv on the dialogue. So we didn't have any script sides for the actors to read going to the audition, but we did know that we wanted them to be able to have great improv skills. So we came up with this idea. Our first thing was, what's going to be similar to the same situation that an audition setup is? And we thought, well, maybe a parole board, because you have a table, a couple cameras, some people sitting behind a desk, and you're sitting there in a chair trying to plead your case. So very similar to an audition. So we thought, okay, as soon as the actor comes in and signs in for the sign-in sheet, we give them a paragraph printed on a piece of paper that they have to read. And it's that they've been in prison for 12 years, in for murder, and they're here to plead their case. And that was it. And so if the actors walked into the audition session in character, then we immediately knew they got it. And those that didn't were sort of flushed real quickly because it just didn't dial in quick enough. So, and then I started coming up with this notion, like about 20 seconds into their big spiel about why they should be released from prison, I would stand up and point to the corner of the room and say, you know, my plumbing started leaking here. I don't know what's wrong with it. And they would have to immediately shift gears and become a plumber and tell me why the rate's going to be too high to fix the pipes in my apartment or whatever. So we threw them curveballs, again, sort of the psychological experiment to see how they thought on their feet, to see how clever they were, how sharp they were, because we knew on Blair we needed people that could do that had that kind of skill set, innately built in. So I took a lot of those lessons from Blair, applied them to Skyman, applied them to every movie I've ever done, actually. So But that was a pretty unique process back in the day.
Linda says HB and Currents Online would love to help get the word out about the mini horror film competition. And Craig asks, can you give us information for how to join the cohort of videographers who will be creating the 3-minute films in the festival, or whatever you're going to call the videography group?
Yeah, if we're going to announce the website that's coming out on September, like right around my birthday. So if you go to my Facebook page or go to gangofrobots.com. We'll announce it from there, and then it'll have its own website where you can submit your videos. So, and we encourage, once the word is out, we encourage as many people that are sitting around, and it's going to be a great prize. I mean, this is not like just do it for your health. This will be, it's going to be like $1,000 first place, $750 for second place, $500 for third place, and then Blackmagic Cameras have promised to give us a $6K camera package for the grand prize winner. So it's going to be a sweet prize for whoever wins this thing. So I'm technically not supposed to be announcing it yet, but we're all in Bainbridge, so it's what the heck. It's all in the family.
And it is 3-minute shorts, horror shorts.
3-minute horror shorts, and the primary rule is that it's called Quarantine Creep Fest, and it's about, can you shoot a horror film in whatever your lockdown location is? It has to be one location in your apartment, your house, or wherever. Interior or exterior, you can use both, but it has to be that one location where you're basically locked down. Make a cool horror movie in 3 minutes in length. And so you don't have to invest your whole life savings into it. You can just do something very clever and very cool. And it could be animation, it could be stop action, it could be live action, doesn't matter.
And so what do you, if you just have to say off the top of your head, what are your favorite little horror scenes or films where you're like, oh my gosh, that's amazing? These guys have it. They aren't yours.
There's so, I mean, Silence of the Lambs, we were talking about Silence of the Lambs today. Jacob's Ladder is probably one of my all-time favorite films. The scene in the subway is one of the most terrifying moments, I think, in cinema for me. Certainly The Shining, the scene where he goes into the bathroom, or there's so many.
The Ring, when she comes out of the TV, and the Japanese.
Yeah, the original Ring, Japanese version of The Ring, that when she's coming out of the TV set. I mean, there's just so many.
Can you think of, what about little horror shorts? I feel like you've seen so many at this point.
There's a lot of really good, incredibly talented horror directors out there that are, and most directors get their starts in shorts and in horror. I've been lucky to be a member on some of the juries at the Idaho Horror Fest, as well as the Mile High Horror Fest, and I've been on some of the shorts programs there. And I can't think of any of the titles off the top of my head because it was a few years ago, but it's a great way to break in. I mean, it's a pretty short hop. If you can put together a really cool short horror film, it's not a big leap for a producer to say, oh yeah, make that into a movie, or bring that level of execution to a feature film. We'll go get a movie made. So it's a great genre to get started in, no doubt.
Awesome. I feel like I don't have any other particularly good questions to ask, unless anybody else has anything that they'd like to ask about. Of course, we can always endlessly talk about the tarantula, and Inez was like, that's not a real tarantula, is there?
Oh yeah, it's real. We have real owls, real tarantula. Our animal wrangler is a friend of mine, Chris Rankin. She worked with me on another film I did called Under the Bed, that we did for A&E Lifetime, and total professional when it comes to, I mean, she literally has a zoo in her house. It's just, between all the animals that she's able to wrangle and all her friends, that's what they do. And I said, hey, Chris, I need 2 owls and I need a tarantula. Can you do it? She goes, no problem. And lo and behold, on set, she shows up with 2 owls and a buddy who's an owl wrangler as well as a tarantula, and they performed perfectly. So yeah, it's all real, it's legit. But I'm told, and she even let the tarantula walk on my hand, that they really you really have to annoy them to get them to sting you. So fortunately I didn't annoy the tarantula enough. So but, pretty harmless.
In your opinion, what's the creepiest place on Bainbridge Island?
Fort Ward, the Fort Ward barracks. This the concrete gun emplacements there with all the graffiti. I've taken a bunch of pictures of that place. I think, this would be a great place to shoot a horror scene. So that's a pretty good creepy place. And they got the magazine kind of basements underneath and stuff like that. Oh, that is so creepy. So that comes to my head immediately is not Fort Ward, but Fort Ward down south. That's a great location. And
you were writing this out not at a creepy place. You're at Joshua Tree National Park.
Yeah, I got into as you remember, I got into our little R-Pod RV and drove out to Black Rock Campground, which is just north of Joshua Tree, and spent a couple of weeks out there kind of hammering out an outline for Skyman. And, I like sort of being immersed in the space where I'm going to write the movie. And it's an amazing, amazing place. I mean, when you're outside in the desert, the sky just comes alive. The stars are incredible. And it's not hard to imagine why people sort of are so connected to UFOs and extraterrestrials when you live in that under that sort of planetarium every night. And it was a great place to get inspiration for Skyman. So yeah, I outlined it out there, and over the course of several months after that, finished the script up. But that was great. That was like the first time I think I really went out with the RV and just like ran it through its paces and was off the grid for a couple of weeks. So that was a lot of fun.
And you're a big Carl Sagan fan. I mean, this still all is the billions and billions. That's really what's at the heart behind this, isn't it?
Yeah, no, 100%. He's a childhood idol of mine, and it's that kind of wonderment and that finding the spirituality in science, right? And how the universe is so much bigger than our imaginations could possibly be, and there's just a certain kind of endless optimism there, I think, that I try to kind of keep in mind, despite how kind of crazy things get here terrestrially. I like to still think that we're just little insignificant beings on a small little island, the blue marble, if you will, that Carl Sagan really inspired. And I think that's a lot of that is in Skyman. That sort of that kind of vastness of ideas,
And what is it that he says on top of as he's staring outside? Something about magic. That was one of your favorite lines.
Oh yeah, the technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Mm-hmm. And I've always liked magic.
And Carl says, I've always liked magic, and I've always really liked that line. And because that's it. It's like, is Carl for real? Is he just fantasizing all of this? Is he just taking us all on a ride, or is he completely legit? And that's why you have to watch the movie. I'm not going to give away the ending, but it does leave open the question of whether or not he was right or not. I like when films do that.
Well, I feel like, kind of growing up near the redneck Riviera in Florida.
Right. Yes, you did.
And being a little kid with a UFO club, and being pretty sure, that you were significant in the grand scheme of the universe, even on a planet of another 6 billion people. A lot of this harkens back to, I know that there's an answer out there, and I'm part of something massive, right?
Mm.
And so it's still, I mean, I always go back to that. Like, people expect this to be a film that has big scares, and it might be about, you know, some horror that's out there, but really it's more about kind of the struggle within and thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's I mean, one of the questions here is that it's, you know, I mean, life is messy, right? Life is inconclusive. Life is complex. People are complex. So, you know, I like anti-heroes and characters that aren't like clearly defined. And I think, and it's a bit of a risk. This is why these kinds of movies don't typically get funded by studios. It's like, you know, one of the most controversial aspects of Blair Witch was the ending of Mike standing in the corner. You never saw the witch, ever. And the studio, when they bought the film, had a real hard time with that for a long time. They wanted to change the ending. They even had us reshoot endings to have more closure there at the end. And part of that ambiguity is what made it so scary. And so with Skyman, it has an ambiguous ending. If you want to believe that he was, you know, sucked up into a spaceship, you could let yourself believe that. But there's another aspect that you could say, well, no, it's something happened that is very explainable by science. And that's who we are as a people, right? Whenever you see a fuzzy UFO photograph, it's never clearly defined, right? It's never like, let me see it land in the middle of Times Square with 50,000 cameras on it. Never happens. There's always this ambiguity associated with this that makes it even more intriguing, I think. And I didn't want to stray from that. I wanted to kind of walk that line with Skyman, that even at the ending, you're not really 100% sure if Carl got what he wanted or not, but you can believe he did, and that's all that matters.
Well, and I also think that we've had this discussion many times on Blair. We had, you know, people call up that said, I want to help you find these missing filmmaking students, and we'd say, no, we made all of it up, these are actors. And they'd say, I know you can't tell the truth for liability reasons, so if you could just tell me, just me, I promise I won't tell anyone else. And there's just no way around stopping people from believing what they want to believe. I feel like that's also become a through line in so many of your films, where you're like, it was such a significant moment. We had this War of the Worlds moment with Blair, where we saw humanity lying to themselves, and you're like, I'm telling you, look, I'm the authority. I know what I made.
I know, and it's pretty crazy, because in one respect, it's not difficult to fool people into thinking something is real. That's sort of the scary aspect of what's all going on in today's society. But it is very difficult to fool someone that something is real if they're really good at critical thinking. And that's what I really work for, is like, you know, even in Skyman, you know, again, lessons learned from Blair Witch and other films, you know, I've had done other interviews, and I've been asked by journalists, like on Skyman, so is Carl real, or is he an actor or whatever? And I said, I'm the Blair guy. You should know, you should assume that none of it is real. And it's just, when you really take the approach that I'm going to make this feel authentic, and I'm going to go to a lot of trouble, even the way we set up the microphones with the actors. I mean, there were times where there's a scene in the film in Skyman where they all get up, you know, they're aroused by the alarm of Carl's little system, his alarm system. They go out and see these, I don't want to give anything away, but they see these things outside. And you know, the sound people said, well, we should go ahead and, you know, mic them up. And I said, no, we don't want to mic them up. We don't want to have lav mics on the actors. Otherwise it would ring false. Even if you didn't know technically what was going on, I still believe subconsciously the audience senses it, that when you see him run away and you don't get all the audio very clearly, there's something authentic about that rings as truth to people. And that's what we applied to Blair Witch. And as a director, you have to resist the urge to overproduce everything, because that's really what you're trained to do. But it plays into that sense of authenticity that a film like this, I think, really, that's the conceit, that it's really asking the audience to kind of buy into that. And so that lends itself to making people believe it's real, but not for the purpose of being a hoax, but to help with the story that is needing that kind of sense of organic realism to help sell it as a story. So and I enjoy that. I enjoy that kind of process. I enjoy that sort of challenge of this sort of pseudo documentary format. It's liberating in a lot of ways, but it's also very challenging in a lot of ways.
Well, I have two final questions that we'll wrap out with.
Mm-hmm.
One was the ending meant to be conclusive? And then do you have a certain writing routine?
Well, I think I answered the conclusive, that it was meant to not be conclusive, that's for sure. Plus, I didn't have the budget for it to be conclusive. I couldn't have had the UFO descending from the sky. But yeah, I mean, if there is a writing routine, I don't really stick to it, that's for sure. I mean, normally when I do write something, it's when an idea comes into my head and it takes root and it starts to grow and grow, and it gets to a point of like critical mass that I've been editing for so many months. I'm so tired of being locked in a room editing, and this idea in the background has been growing in my head. It kind of reaches this point to where I have to go out and put it on paper. I have to kind of start at least outlining it, and as you know, I oftentimes I'll go off on these sort of, sojourns for a couple of weeks just to outline it, whether it's I lock myself in a hotel room or I go off on the RV or whatever, and to get away from any distractions, just to hammer out the main beats, the main outline of the script. So I have the blueprint there in front of me, and then I can come back and sort of fill in all the gaps. And certainly having a wife that is a writer herself is a huge advantage that can keep me on the right path, and often does. So, but I still consider myself more of a director first than a straight up writer, because I always write for what I want to do, for what I want to direct. And there's been a few scripts I've written and sold and put out into Hollywood, but I like writing for myself, I guess. And that's, for better or worse, it's just sort of been my process.
Well, I think that's it. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
I'll let Arts and Humanities Bainbridge close us out here. Thank you so much for the invite, guys, and thanks everyone for coming. It's good to see some familiar faces.
Yeah, Arts and Humanities would like to thank the two of you so much. Julia and Daniel, you did a fantastic job. And Daniel, I have to say, I just love your sense of wonder and how you celebrate these quirky individuals. We at Arts and Humanities believe that art connects us, that art saves lives, that it helps those of us, especially in the middle of a pandemic, feel a whole lot less lonely. Yeah. And thank you for all you do to help with that. So for those of you who don't know very much about us here at Arts and Humanities Bainbridge, please go to bainbridgecurrents.com. Take a look at what's going on Bainbridge. Julia and Daniel are two of Bainbridge Island's very own creatives here, and there's so much more where that came from. It's a great time to stay connected and learn about what's out there. And if you feel so moved by programs like this, support us. Go to our website, go to Currents and make a donation. Thank you both very much. Great evening.
Thank you so much, Linda, for having us. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.